All right, let's dive into one of the biggest mysteries out there, time itself. It's funny. Physics gives us this one picture of time, but the way we actually experience it feels completely different. So what's going on? Well, there's a pretty wild idea that might just bring these two worlds together. So let's get right to the heart of it with this question. Is time something that just exists, like a landscape we travel through? Or is it something that's actively happening, being created in every single moment? I mean, think about it. The answer to that question could literally change how we see the universe. And to really grasp just how big that question is, we have to look at this major paradox that's sitting right in the middle of modern physics. It's kind of wild. The very science that's meant to describe reality gives us these totally conflicting ideas about what time actually is. Okay, so on one side you've got Einstein's relativity. This gives us what's called the block universe. The idea here is that all of time, past, present, and future, exists at once, kind of like a frozen block of space-time. But that just doesn't feel right, does it? Our lived experience is completely different. For us, the past is over, the future isn't here yet, and only the now is real. It's a total clash between what physics says and what we feel. And this isn't just a one-off problem. It's a deep crack running through all of science. You have relativity's static time fighting with thermodynamics, which says time only moves forward. You've got quantum mechanics with equations that work forwards and backwards in time, clashing with the fact that when we measure something, the outcome is final. And none of this lines up with our own feeling of time stretching and shrinking. It's a huge mess, and it tells us we're probably missing something big. So, with all these contradictions piled up, what do? Well, this is where a really new way of thinking comes in. Maybe we've been looking at it all wrong. What if time isn't a passive stage that the universe performs on? What if time is an active participant, a creative process that's constantly building reality itself? There's a great word for this idea, chronopoiesis. It's from Greek, and it literally means time making. And that's the core of it. Moments aren't just ticks on a clock. They are actively being made, constantly being generated, born from the moment before and woven into the fabric of what's real. So in this picture, time doesn't just pass, it happens. So that begs the question, right? How does this time-making actually work? Well, the model proposes this really elegant and powerful cycle called the Creative Triad. You can think of this triad as our roadmap for the rest of this journey. It's a guide to how anything genuinely new, maybe even time itself, comes into existence. Okay, so this triad is built on three pillars. First, you need distinction. This is all about separation, creating a boundary, defining one thing from another. Then you have integration. This is where you take those separate parts and you link them up, you unify them into some kind of whole. And finally, the magic step, transcendence. This is where something totally new emerges from that combination. A new structure, a new behavior, something that just wasn't there before. And here's the key. You need all three. It's not a menu, it's a recipe. All right, let's see how this cycle actually creates real, unpredictable stuff in the universe. Because this isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. No, this triad is grounded in the math of what are called nonlinear systems. And these things are basically the engines of creation. And here's the key thing to get. You just can't get anything truly new from a simple linear system, where 1 + 1 always equals 2. It's predictable. Real creation, the emergence of things that are genuinely surprising, that happens in nonlinear systems. These are the systems with feedback loops, with thresholds, where a tiny little nudge can cause a massive game-changing transformation. And what's amazing is you can see this triad playing out everywhere in physics. Take the three-body problem. Two bodies orbiting each other is a nice, stable, integrated system. But you add a third body, that's the distinction, and suddenly you get chaos, these beautiful, unpredictable, transcendent new orbits. Or Einstein's equations. They integrate space, time, and matter, and what emerges? Totally new things like black holes. That's transcendence. Even quantum measurement fits. You start with an integrated superposition of possibilities, the measurement forces a distinction, and bam, a single transcendent classical moment is born. Okay, so if this creative process is happening everywhere, could this be the thing that explains all those different arrows of time we were confused about before? And, maybe more importantly, for this to be real science, can we actually measure any of this? Well, this framework suggests, yeah, absolutely. That arrow of time from thermodynamics, things getting more disordered, and the cosmological arrow, the universe expanding, even our own psychological arrow, where we remember the past but not the future. This model says they aren't separate mysteries. They're all just different views of the same fundamental creative cycle, playing out over and over again. And this is the part that gets me really excited, because this is where the whole idea goes from being cool philosophy to actual testable science. You can put numbers on this. Each step in the triad maps to something we can measure. For distinction, we can use entropy. That's just a measure of how many different states are possible. For integration, we can use things like correlation to see how tightly connected the parts are. And for transcendence, we can literally measure the gain in complexity, the new structure that wasn't there before. This means we can test it, we can try to prove it wrong, which is what makes it real science. All right, let's take this to the next level. This is probably the most ambitious, out there part of the idea. If this creative triad is truly a universal process, could it also be happening inside our own minds, in our consciousness? So this is where things get really fascinating, but we have to be clear it is speculative. What's being proposed here isn't a final answer, but a structural parallel. The idea is that the same pattern, the same dynamic cycle that creates novelty in the cosmos, might also be the one that creates novelty inside our heads. Just think about it. The act of perception, that's a form of distinction, right? It's separating yourself from the world out there. And what about how our brain takes in all these different signals, sight, sound, touch, and weaves them into a single unified experience? That's a perfect example of integration. And then our ability to be creative, to imagine a future that doesn't exist yet, that is pure transcendence. Again, this is a hypothesis, not proven fact, but the parallel is pretty striking. Now, it's super important to be clear about what's being claimed here and what isn't. This framework, it's a new way of looking at things, a lens that could help us unify how we think about emergence in time. It definitely gives us new, testable ideas, but what it does not do is claim to have solved consciousness. And it's not here to replace quantum mechanics or relativity. It's a tool, a new direction for research, not some final, ultimate truth. And so that leaves us with this one big, final idea to chew on. What if reality isn't a collection of things, but a creative process, an unfolding story? If that's true, then emergence, the constant creation of new patterns, new structures, new moments, isn't some weird, rare thing that happens sometimes. It's the whole point. It's the fundamental rule of the game.